I think deterrence will be fine, but I think there's going to be continued pain in terms of readiness, i.e. running costs, training, exercises, recruitment, support, spares. And those problems are going to continue for the next 4 to 5 years because fundamentally there's not enough money. The Strategic Defence Review said we needed about 4.5% of our gross domestic product spent on defence. We're only getting 2.6%. There's a big gap between A and B.
Now, the much-awaited Defence Investment Plan is due this week. It's said to be worth up to £15 billion, and for the Navy, it's thought to include a plan for a hybrid vessels that are built to deploy drones and are not traditional warships. Let's talk to John Foreman, the former Royal Navy officer who was Defence Attaché to Moscow and in Kyiv. Hello to you, John.
Hello, John.
Hi, so you'll have seen the report. Welcome. You'll have seen the report. This plan is now said to be worth an extra maybe £14.5–15 billion. Originally, Keir Starmer had put it together to increase defence spending by £13.5 billion, so about an extra billion extra. Is that discouraging to you? What are your thoughts?
Well, I think there's lots of big numbers flying around. I think the 13 to 14 billion mentioned is actually to buy out the current programme, which is seriously overheated, because of decisions taken over the last 5–10 years, also to give pay rises. So there's the current money. There's also the Defence Investment Plan is meant to be looking over 10 years, which is huge amounts because the mod spends £60 billion a year. So when 60 billion times 10 is a lot of money.
Okay, I mean, does this then look to you, from what we've seen, because we haven't seen the final plan, does this pass that test of deterrence, something that's going to put Russia, Putin, off any idea of aggression?
Well, I think the previous Chief of Defence Staff, Tony Radakin, said there's a Moscow test. Does the DIP, the Defence Investment Plan, do the results deter Russia? And I'll be looking tomorrow at such things as what it says about nuclear weapons and the replacement of Trident, on nuclear submarines, on long-range missiles, about allies, and also about how we make ourselves readiness. But I think it's probably fair to say that I think deterrence will be fine, but I think there's going to be continued pain in terms of readiness, i.e. running costs, training, exercises, recruitment, support, spares. And those problems are going to continue for the next 4 to 5 years because fundamentally there's not enough money. The Strategic Defence Review said we needed about 4.5% of our gross domestic product spent on defence. We're only getting 2.6%. There's a big gap between A and B.
All right. You were in Moscow. You served in Moscow at the embassy there. You know Russia. You follow these things very, very closely. How do you gauge the threat from Putin now? Russia is really feeling the strain of its war in Ukraine. So as a threat to NATO, even a conventional threat, what do you think?
I think deterrence holds, both nuclear and conventional. I think the biggest threat we face is from the unconventional, i.e. cyber and hacking and sabotage and assassinations and political interference. I think all the measures in the Defence Investment Plan will improve our deterrence. And I think that some of the reports of a conflict by 2030 are overblown. And I think you can judge that by the government's urgency. If there was a serious threat of a war by 2030, we would be pouring an awful lot of money into defence now, and we're not. So I think they've taken the assessment that they have a bit more time to rebuild the armed forces. That said, I don't think there's any space for complacency. I think we need to continue to get what we've got out, and we need to continue to invest in the future. And I think with this Defence Investment Plan, I'm not expecting much. I think it's avoiding hard choices. I think it's avoiding prioritisation. I think we'll just stumble on until maybe the next 2.5 years when the next government gets to grips with it again.
So you don't consider, though, the British government can be the ones accused of complacency? Look at the amount of money that's being spent by NATO partners butting up against Russia, the Polands, the Lithuanias, the Latvias. They're spending a much higher proportion of their national earnings on defence. Maybe Britain, maybe countries like us are the ones who are behind the curve.
No, I think we should be spending more on defence. I think I would like to see hard language in the Defence Investment Plan about when we will get to 3% and when we will get to 3.5% on NATO commitment. And I don't think you're going to see that there because the Treasury in particular is very leery about making long-range decisions like that. I think on the Poland, Lithuania, Estonia question, I think we have very different security dilemmas in the United Kingdom than those countries do. I can see why they are a bit more alarmed and spending a bit much more money now. But we need to spend to meet our NATO commitments. Yeah. But again, I don't think we need to spend should we say, 3.5% before 2035, based on the threat assessment.
I'm interested in what you mean by that. I mean, surely, Poland, Lithuania, Latvia, their defence priorities are the same as ours. If they end up in conflict with Russia, we are in conflict with Russia too. It's the nature of NATO. It's the nature of the Article 5 commitment.
I mean, I think firstly is they share or very close land borders with Russia, so they have different defence priorities. I think the second thing I'd say is we're also spending an awful lot of money on nuclear deterrence, which we extend to those countries. So we all know that the conventional forces the UK need rebuilding, but we're also spending a huge amount of money into nuclear forces, recapitalisation of our nuclear enterprise, which they don't have to do. So I think in alliance we all bring different tools to the table. We don't need to all do the same thing. But as I said, politically, we need to get to 3.5% by 2035. That's the agreed target.
Right. Now, as an official who served in Moscow and in Kyiv, I wonder if you share the view that because Russia is now feeling the strain in the war in Ukraine, it may be that Putin goes for the option of upping the ante, maybe by increasing pressure and tensions with those NATO neighbours, with NATO as a whole, to try to get the people of Russia behind him in a way that that sort of support seems to have been faltering somewhat.
Well, he's been trying that. There was a speech this weekend talking about, this is a fight against the collective West, that the Ukraine is just a proxy of the fascist regime trying to bring us all down. I think that as long as deterrence is credible and capable, and we communicate it clearly to Russia, then I think we are safe. I don't exclude Russia escalating versus Ukraine, or escalating at home by mobilising and bringing more forces to try and one last heave. I think Putin is very concentrated on winning, as he sees it, in the Donbass. I don't think he wants to escalate from a local war to potentially regional war with NATO, given the uncertainty of what Donald Trump would do. So, again, as long as we stay calm, do the investment, maintain our readiness, and communicate it clearly to Russia, we should be fine.
But you'll know better than most that tension can escalate into conflict, and not always at a time of your choosing. Sometimes events just run away with things, don't they?
Yeah, that's what the Americans said in their last assessment. And I think one thing we don't have, and which we lack, are clear channels of communication with the Russian government. Those have been cut over the last few years, and we tend to talk and shout past each other. I think the Americans made quite clear in their assessment that the highest risk is of an unintended escalation from an incident which spins out of control. I don't think it's in either of our interest to allow that to happen, and that's why we have to, even though we have to hold our noses, talk to them in some form to express our concerns about their behaviour and also our resolve to defend ourselves.
John Foreman, former Royal Navy officer and defence attaché in Moscow and in Kyiv, thank you for talking to us.